everybody, my name is Delzar and today we're going to be doing a reaction video to the History of Latex Fetishism, Part 2. Now, I've already seen Part 1. If you want to know where that video is, go into the description. You'll probably find it there. If it's not there, go to the channel that will be linked there and the original video link, and you'll be able to find it that way, okay? Honestly, you should be able to find it anyways, but yeah. Let's begin. Perhaps the writer of his fetishism is an identity confirming process that enables him to maintain his private identity, his real self, in an otherwise sinister universe that seems to deny him. I'm realizing that no one else here is gonna understand why the fuck I'm laughing. My mom just fucking texted me. Cunt. Yeah, no, there's no way in hell I'm actually gonna respond to that shit. Let's just keep going. The History of Latex Fetishism, Part 2, 1900s to 1960s.
Hello and welcome to Part 2 of the History of Latex Fetishism series. In this video, we're going to analyze the cultural and societal challenges faced by early fetish pioneers during the first...
By the way, dear YouTube, what do you mean where's Slayer when you need him? Oh, yeah, Mom Slayer. Yeah, get it what you're drinking. Took me a second to understand the joke. But, by the way, YouTube, this is for constructive and educational purposes. Nothing here is porno. Okay? Like, you already got porno videos on your shit. This is not that.
Half of the 20th century. With that, let's get started on the History of Latex Fetishism, Part 2.
Okay, society,
Before we
psychiatric
dive into
opinions.
the expansion of the fetish, and more specifically latex communities, we first need to discuss several threats that individuals with fetishistic interests faced. More specifically, stigma from the psychiatric community and society in general.
God
Nowadays,
damn it.
It seems almost alien to
Mental
classify
itis.
homosexuality, masochism, and fetishism as mental disorders, at least akin to the level of schizophrenia.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Also, it's like, why the fuck would they be? And then I realized it's like he just said, why would you do that?
But 100 years ago, when research on sexual fetishism first started, this viewpoint was very different. In 1886, one of the first medical publications on sexual fetishism was Richard Kraft Ebbing's Psychopathia Sexualis.
Psychopathia Sexualis? That sounds like a fucking... I know that it's like not, but it sounds like a shitpost.
Sexual fetishism as a state in which an individual can only obtain sexual gratification in the presence, or imaginary presence, of a fetish object. Sigmund Freud would later build upon this definition, oddly claiming in 1927 that a sexual fetish was a substitute for a penis. Freud claimed that male children who later developed into fetishists had an early life experience in which they discovered that women do not have penises.
And they refused to accept this observation. What?
And they refused to accept.
I know Freud is like weird as shit, but I need. Do I need to check out Freud more?
Other psychologists, like Morris North, would later go on to compare this explanation to the rubber fetish scene, claiming that a person fully dressed in rubber with a hood may resemble, well, a penis.
Really?
Sigmund Freud actually had a lot to say on the subject of sexual fetishism. Maybe he was closeted about some personal desires.
Yeah.
One of his theories, which persisted in the psychiatric community well into the 1980s, was called trauma theory. This theory states that sexual fetishism stems from a traumatizing experience as a child. For example, a child who is physically reprimanded by their teacher may grow up to develop a femdom fetish as an adult.
I would say no, but I do know some people. But correlation does not mean causation.
German philosopher Herbert Marcuse would build upon this theory, stating that sexual perversions express rebellion against the subjugation of sexuality under the order of procreation and against the institutions which guarantee this order. In
Mhm.
layman's terms, this is basically describing fetishism as an aversion to normal sex practices and removing its
Mhm.
intended goal of making children. Because God forbid anyone have sex
For
just for
just
fun.
fun. That's some bullshit. Anyways, who cares? Like, really? You saying that sex can only be for making kids, bitch? I don't want no
Because a
kids.
majority of fetishists were perceived to be men by these psychologists, it's also believed that a rejection of the fetish by female partners would lead to increased traumatic feelings about the fetish desires. In the 1970 book, The Outer Fringe of Sex, Morris North classifies sexual fetishism as faulty learning, similar to that of a bad
Wow.
habit which can be cured from practices such as aversion therapy and conditioning. North goes on to say that this faulty
That's
learning is
so
reinforced
fucked.
through masturbatory fantasies, which reinforce the learned deviance. Thankfully, a more
Yeah, yeah, just like, yay, murder. It's like, God. Of course, this is how you treat people. Shock therapy and drowning.
modern theory called sexual imprinting
Imprinting.
started gaining popularity in the 1970s. This
Mm-hmm.
hypothesis suggests that people acquire sexual preferences during a sensitive period in early life and learn the characteristics of desirable mates at an early age. In 2013, this theory was tested with a group of sexually naive rats. One group of rats was given a tight fitting jacket which they wore during their first sexual encounter, while a control group wore nothing at all. In later sexual encounters, the group of rats which did not wear the
Mm-hmm.
jacket
Mm-hmm.
copulated with no problems. However, the group which wore the jacket during their initial sexual intercourse had significantly fewer ejaculations and lowered sexual inhibitions.
God
That
damn it.
is, until the jacket was added. To this day, the sexual imprinting theory
Really? So we use, yeah, naive rat. We using rats now to substitute humans. I know rats are intelligent and that they can be smart and all that shit, but at the same time, you really saying that a rat is equivalent? Like, I don't know, man.
is still a highly regarded explanation for the development of sexual behavior. Another researcher to take note of is Paul Gebhard, who
Mm-hmm.
during the 1980s would classify
Why does he look like the kid on the fucking Gerber, on like the fucking Gerber bottle? Just really, really grown up now. Like, he looks like the Gerber kid.
the use
Well,
of
the Gerber baby,
fetishistic
you know what I mean.
materials into two categories: media and form. For example, items such as high heels, black
Mm-hmm.
opera gloves, and corsets are classified as form. This is
Okay,
when
so
such
object
items are
fetishes.
given new meaning within a fetishistic context.
Okay.
The other category, media, focuses mostly on the substance of the fetish object. Paul would commonly
Ah.
tie this to the leather community, where it was the leather itself that was of interest, regardless of it being in the form of jackets, gloves, boots, or whatever else. Keep this classification in
Mm-hmm.
mind
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
later on in the video, as pre 1950s fetishistic pornography and its associated communities focused almost exclusively on the form objects, as opposed to the media focus, which grew into popularity during the 60s and 70s.
Oh.
One thing is for certain though: in the beginning, fetishists were extreme social outcasts, treated as mentally ill and sexually deviant. These people were forced to hide their desires in total secrecy, even from their partners. For example, it wouldn't be until 1987 when homosexuality was completely removed as a DSM mental illness. Sexual fetishism is still
Honestly, I still believe that, like, there's so much fucking shit that should have been done earlier. At least things have been made and progress has been done, but fucking hell.
classified as a DSM mental illness. However, its scope was changed in 1980 to remove body parts as a fetish, and again in
What?
2013 to only classify cases such as non human
Okay,
objects, the
back.
suffering, or
Welcome,
humiliating.
local. This is this is the history of latex fetishism part two. I have no idea if you were there for the part one of this video.
Of oneself or one's partner, and pedophilia.
Hmm.
In
Obscenity
addition to the
laws.
psychiatric and
Fucking
societal
stupid.
implications previously discussed, the emerging fetish communities had an even bigger problem to deal with: the
The
law.
law.
We first need to understand a little thing called obscenity law. Now, for the sake of time, we're only going to focus on the United States and the United Kingdom, but both of these countries adopted a similar definition for what classifies something as obscene. This
Mm-hmm.
definition was established in the 1868 case of Regina versus Hicklin, which defines obscene content as anything that tries to
To
degrade
deprave
or
or
corrupt
corrupt
those
those
whose
whose
minds are
minds.
open to such immoral influences.
The
A
fuck?
major flaw of this definition is that it specifically ignores the contextual artistic or literary merits for obscene content, but more on that later. In the United States, any content labeled obscene was made illegal in 1873 with the passing
They
of the
tried to
Comstock
outlaw
Clause.
porn.
In addition to
That's
criminalizing
fucking hilarious.
pornography, the act
Bro,
also
they tried
made
to
illegal
criminalize porn.
and also
Bro, hey, local. Imagine if this had happened at the same time as prohibition. It would have been funny as shit. Wait, hold up. Actually, hold up. No, this is around the same damn time, isn't it? Yeah, kind of. It's not 1920. It's 19 something something something. Shit, been funny as fuck.
punishable up to 5 years imprisonment with hard labor to sell, lend, or give away any obscene publication or article used for contraception or abortion.
So you can't sell condoms, you can't sell Viagra, you can't sell porn. The fuck there to sell? Because we all know sex sells. Fuck, the mafia would have probably overthrown the government at that point, bro. Like shit. When the mafia and the leather and when the fetishists and the mafia start working together, you know shit's gone south. When the fetish mafia comes through, what you gonna do? And local, yeah, he's basically asking for someone to pay for the redeem, so we do tabs instead.
The act also criminalized the use of the U.S. Postal Service to send items
So
such
it's
as
contraceptives,
contraceptives,
so no
sex toys,
condoms.
and even personal letters.
Oh yeah, I forgot sex toys. I'm pretty sure there's still like laws in different states. Like I think one of the states of the U.S. Says that you can't have more than 8 dildos, and I don't know why the fuck it says 8. But at the same time, who the hell wrote that law and thought that's the only amount of dildos you were allowed to have? You may only have up to 8 dildos. If you want to get more, you must replace your arsenal. I'm like, bitch, it's a southern state too. So I'm like, you saying that they can have a gun, but they can't have a dick? Like, really?
With any sexual content or information. A famous case from this law came in 1957 with Samuel Roth versus the United States,
Southern
in which
states.
Roth was charged for distributing pornography in the publication American Aphrodite. This case updated the definition of obscene content, reaffirming that pornography is not protected under the First Amendment and describing the content as utterly without redeeming social importance.
So the First Amendment doesn't matter if it's porn, I guess. Well, what the fuck? Freedom of expression, freedom of speech.
Eventually,
Fuck
more
them.
cases would come about which modified the court's definition
Mm-hmm.
of obscenity. A notable example came from a book published in 1749
Damn.
titled John Cleland's Memoirs of a Woman of Pleasure, or more commonly referred to as Fanny Hill. This 1966 ruling established the precedent of pornography works having literary and historical value, greatly weakening prior obscenity clauses within the Comstock Act.
What you gonna do
Following
about
the
it, bitch? It's
Fanny Hill
history now.
decision from 1967 to 1969, obscenity arrests and convictions in the United States sharply dropped. While parts of the Comstock laws were modified over time,
Also, can we like just think about this real quickly? They called the anti-porn laws the Comstock laws. Bro, this is the Comstock laws. How did you the fuck? Your name is stupid. Did no one ever think about that for like 2 seconds? How are we gonna make the anti-porn laws horny euphemisms? Like that's funny as shit.
Vestiges remain until the 1990s. For example, it wasn't until the 1972 Einstein versus Bard case where it was ruled that unmarried people had the right to possess contraception on the same basis as married couples. In the
Yeah.
1987 case of Oregon versus Henry, Oregon became the first U.S. state to abolish the offense of obscenity in state
Hey,
law
good for
after
Oregon.
police raided Earl Henry's adult bookstore.
Damn, they raided the
In
bookstore.
Great Britain, obscenity laws weren't any better. The
Oh God.
1868 Regina versus Hickland
Don't
case
tell me they
not
got the
only
Peaky Blinders out
established the
here now.
definition of obscene
Yes, I'm gonna
content,
reference that
but also
show. It's the
provided
only thing I know
legal
about Britain during
justification
this
for the
time period.
seizure and destruction of obscene and pornographic materials. The act also granted authorities the ability to issue search warrants for premises suspected of housing such materials. In
How
1959,
dare.
the Obscene Publications Act was brought into law, which, as I'm sure you could have guessed, created new offenses for publishing obscene material in the defense of the public good. This law is still active and used today, however, its frequency has sharply decreased over time. For
Really?
example, in 1996, there were
There's only a few types of porn that shouldn't actually exist. And if that's what the law is used for, good, congratulations. If it's used for regular average porn, why the fuck are you stopping it now? Like, come on now. You know what the fuck the internet is?
562 cases charged under this act, with 324 individuals convicted and a third of these convictions resulting in prison sentences.
Mm-hmm.
However, in 2005, the number of prosecuted cases had fallen to just 35. One of the most recent obscenity laws passed was a 2014
Oh
modification
boy,
to the
started cracking
UK
up the art
Communications
video.
Act. This ruling has been subjugated to criticism for its widespread banning of any
Excuse me, what? Excuse me, what? The fuck is this? Just gonna like go back real quick. It's cool, but like in public,
number of prosecuted
like
cases
take that
had
shit inside
fallen
your
to
house.
just 35.
Hold up, we fought to be seen. Do not ban us from the screen. Okay, okay. I reserve my right to English.
One of the most
Vice.
recent obscenity
Okay.
laws passed was a 2014
Why is the video just glitched out? It's not even me. It's the actual video.
modification to
At VOD of the gag. Free speech. Oh my god. Hey, MTF. Shush. This is not the video to be kink shaming on.
the UK Communications Act. This ruling has been subjugated to criticism for its
Face sitting protest.
widespread banning of any pornographic content which contains sadomasochism,
Mm.
physical restraints, water sports, erotic
Mm-hmm.
asphyxiation, face sitting, fisting, and female ejaculation. Yeah.
Wow. Just gonna say this right here, right now. Number one, cool, cool. Not from you, really. Cool, cool, cool. I haven't really done it.
I can't believe that last one's on the list. So why did I spend so much time highlighting both the psychiatric and legislative communities in relation to porn and fetishism? Well, I
Mm-hmm.
believe this to be necessary background information, which shows the general culture and community in which these fetish groups would
You
first
see how
develop.
depressed she looks?
Fetishists had a lot to worry about, with risks of imprisonment for porn distributions and public ridicule such as being labeled a pervert or a sexual deviant. It's truly a wonder that the kink scene was able to form at all. However, in order for these communities to form, creative legal and societal loopholes needed to be developed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hold up, I didn't read that at all. Hold up, I really didn't read. I wasn't paying enough attention. I thought he was gonna read it out to me. The fuck? Okay. The rubber fetishist is truly the most secretive of deviants. Gillian Freeman, The Undergrowth of Literature, 1969. Fetish literature and pseudo pornography.
Because sexual fetishism was so stigmatized, publishers were often faced with threats of being shut down and
Mm-hmm.
arrested. These
Mm-hmm.
risks would extend well into the 21st century, with even modern obscenity laws still enforced today. But let's go back
Fucking
over
hell.
100 years to the early 1900s, when the stakes for publishing such materials were even greater.
Wait, they
This
were
leads us
higher?
to the London Life series of magazines.
Yo.
London Life was a British publication which
I
was
was wondering why she got a
internationally
gun.
distributed and consisted of multiple magazines featuring similar fetishistic literature.
Mm-hmm.
Distribution of London Life extended to Canada, South Africa, Australia, Malta, France, India,
God
and the United
damn.
States.
They, okay, so obviously Australia is very fucking far, but that makes sense because Australia is very connected. India makes sense. Canada, US makes sense. Makes sense. Where the fuck is Malta? Is Malta this one? Malta has to be this one. 'Cause this is France and this is South Africa. So this is Malta. Also, so I was like, where the fuck is Malta from?
Among other countries, the magazine was a worldwide advertising venue for craftspersons who created fetishistic clothing as well as sellers of erotic books and photography. This magazine would often feature articles about bizarre topics such as
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
transvestism, S&M style punishments, tight-lacing corsets, and high-heeled boots. Just a side note, you will see the word bizarre featured multiple times
Oh
throughout
boy.
this video. Think of bizarre as a synonym for fetish, as it wouldn't be until the mid-20th century when people would change the definition of fetish to describe a sexualized desire for an object. London Life's
Mm-hmm.
history can be traced all the way back to 1861 with a magazine called Penny Illustrated Paper. This magazine would merge with at least 15 other publications over a 65-year period. One defining feature of these early publications was the inclusion of erotic and bizarre topics. In the
Ooh.
19th century, these topics predominantly included tight-lacing fetishistic corsetry and corporal
Okay.
punishment or
Okay, so I'm gonna say it right now, right here. Fuck, my goddamn tongue is twisting and twirling inside his head. Um, I'll say this right here, right now. Every time I see one of these old ass like drawings of basically any of this shit, and I go, "How did you think of this one?" Because from an engineering standpoint, you could have done this easier. It seems so difficult. Also, again, MGF. If you got a problem with it, this is a 40-minute video. Leave. Come back in an hour.
flagellation. These magazines would also have a correspondence section, often filled with kink-related questions, serialized fiction, artwork, and even photographs. The early 20th century would see a shift in focus of the fetish community outlined in these magazines. Moving beyond the Victorian era flagellation, the new trend of strong women or muscular girls would come
Mm-hmm.
about. Often, these women were identified as suffragettes, who ultimately dominated and
Suffragettes.
humiliated their little runt of a chap husband.
Such a femdom. Ah, shit, it's just fucking femdom at this point. Um, Also at the same time, bro, she looks fucked up. Yeah, they're consenting adults, it's fine.
Eventually,
Hopefully, don't
through
fuck them up too
consolidation
badly.
and mergers, the first issue of London Life was published on June 1st, 1918. London Life would continue until 1941, when the publication's
Mhm.
London office was bombed by the Luftwaffe in World War II,
Oh
forcing an end
no.
to the publication. Now, to clarify, London Life itself was not specifically a kink magazine, covering movies, fashion, and other pop culture, but it did help create discussion about many bizarre topics in the late 1920s and 1930s, and this would inspire several of London Life's readers to take
Mm-hmm.
things to the next level.
Oh boy. Charles Giet,
Taking
the
inspiration from the
G-string
London
king.
Life series of magazines, we move our attention to 1930s New York City and the interesting life of Charles Guyette.
What's
Guyette
Giet?
is credited as the first person in the United States to produce and distribute fetish art and literature. Guyette owned a shop selling theatrical costumes and supplies, which
Mm-hmm.
provided him access to corsets, opera gloves, and custom made boots, among other things. He would frequently
Lovely.
feature these and other theatrical related items in fetish pictures, which he would mail to clients, often on a commission basis. A common theme found within Guyette's photography was the use of costumes for his models. From 1931 to 1935, Guyette also advertised and contributed to the London Life
Yes, I
magazine.
pictured fucking
The
Leia.
global distribution of London Life allowed Guyette to gain a massive mailing list following and many key contacts who would act as successors to Guyette in the following years. However, the distribution of Guyette's obscene pictures was in violation of the U.S. Comstock
Mm-hmm.
laws. Inevitably, in 1935, Charles Guyette was arrested and sent to federal prison for using the
God damn
Postal
it.
Service to distribute pornography. However, this didn't deter Charles. With an increasing market demand for this type of content, Charles would continue to sell his fetish pictures. But from this point on, Charles would use various aliases to
Yes.
protect himself from further litigation. This makes tracking his activity a bit tricky after the mid 1930s. Charles also worked
Aww.
with several key innovators who would
I want. Okay, so her on the right. This looks fucking fun. I want these. These would be cool.
further
Anyways.
advance the fetish pornography scene. This led to the creation of many pinup magazines such as Wink, Titter, Beauty Parade, Whisper.
Sorry. Oh, okay. I'm gonna make as many jokes as possible for the sake of this being a reaction video. I gotta say funny shit.
Of many
Hold
pinup
up.
magazines such as Wink.
Wink. Girl, look at your fucking eyebrows. They're stupidly high raised. Motherfucker, you wink and you bat your eyes. We gonna go flying.
Titter, Beauty
Titter? Damn, Elon fucked you up, didn't he? Don't worry. Once he gets his hands on you, he gonna be treating you like Slickback in this motherfucker.
Parade, Whisper,
Beauty Parade? Honestly, I can't even say anything right here. You just genuinely look nice.
Eyeful, and Flirt.
Whisper, eyeful, and flirt. This all sounds like euphemisms for weird shit. Which is what they literally are, but damn. Eh.
While today the content from Charles may seem vanilla and hardly risque, in the 1930s this was absolutely groundbreaking, and audiences would soon demand more.
John Alexander Scott Coots. John Willie. December 1902 to August 16, no, 1962.
John Alexander Scott Codis, or more commonly known as John Willie, was another
Mm-hmm.
early fetish pioneer in fetish and
So
bondage art.
spanking.
John first became involved in the kink scene during the 1920s when he joined the High Heel Club in Brisbane, Australia. During this
Ooh.
time, John would sell drawings and photographs of bondage scenes through the club's mailing list, in addition to providing content for the aforementioned London Life magazine. However, John grew tired of perceived conservatism within the London Life magazine, and in 1945, John would move
So
to New
he
York
said,
City, where he
fuck
was
it.
introduced to the American fetish underground by none other than Charles Guyette. The
Oh
collaborative
boy,
efforts
we got him in
between these two
cahoots.
would lead to the creation of the first major fetish magazine,
Bizarre.
As stated by John, I thought I could turn out a better magazine than London Life. Certainly, I could do a lot better than the artists in there. It would end up taking John over a decade to produce the first issue of Bizarre, mainly due to constant financial issues that were compounded by World War II, halting all activity in the production. However,
That's
in
actually a really good point.
1946, Bizarre was released. Approximately 5,000 issues of the magazine were distributed for 25 cents each. Bizarre was in
Nice.
circulation from
I mean, for that
1946 until
amount of money back then.
1956, with 20 issues produced. By the end of the magazine's run, between 10,000 and 15,000 copies were distributed per issue. The magazine included many photographs, often of Willie's wife, and also drawings of costumes, some based on ideas from the readers. Bizarre is arguably one of the first explicit and fetish-oriented magazines in the United States, with John acting as the writer, artist, photographer, and publisher of the magazine. Bizarre would also be one of the first magazines to feature photographs of rubber fetishism. This rubber content largely consisted of reader submissions in the form of, albeit slightly creepy looking, rubber hoods and masks.
I'm gonna be honest with you. No, I'm just gonna say this. Personally, the fucking eyes do take me out of it. It's when the fucking eyes aren't actually their real eyes. It's weird to me. It's just the realism.
Or Macintosh ring. coats.
Everything else is cool.
One of the most famous pieces from this magazine was Sweet Gwendolyn, a comic with themes of bondage in almost every picture. In general, the magazine was filled with themes like bondage, high heels, sadomasochism, transvestism, and body modifications. However, despite the nature of the magazine, John was able to circumvent censorship and orders to cease publication because he was careful to avoid nudity, homosexuality,
Man said, you know what? They can't be naked and I can't have the gays. But everything else is allowed to fly, so I can go under the radar, I guess. Well, damn.
violence, and obvious depictions of things that might be read as perverse or immoral.
Leonard Bertman, or Lenny. Years active, 1951 to 1989.
The first true descendant of Bizarre came in 1955 from Exotic. This was a fetish magazine released by Leonard Bertman, who originally got his start in the fetish industry during the early 1950s, working for another famous pornographer, Irving Klaw. The magazine Exotic was entirely devoted to fetish.
I actually really like this design on the side right here. I know, obviously, y'all can't fucking see it because, well, it's mainly covered up by my fucking chat, but this is actually really cool. You would be able to see it if you actually went to the original video, which you probably should, but, you know.
Fashions, including corsets, boots, high heels, leather, and of course, rubber. The articles, many written by Bertman using an alias, covered various aspects of sadomasochism, with men depicted as slaves to the impervious, all-powerful women. In fact, it was through Bertman's publications that the modern dominatrix image came to fruition. Frequently, Bertman would also feature uncredited Guyette images for his publications. Even though
Uncredited,
Exotic
so
had no
Steph.
nudity, in 1957, Bertman would be targeted as a pornographer. Bertman was relentlessly pursued by both the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, which at the time was acting as a censorship agency, and local law
Fuck those
enforcement.
people.
Eventually, he was arrested, his magazines and materials confiscated, and he was brought to a trial. An itemized inventory of the material seized from federal officers during this time included 167,000
God
pictures
damn.
of nude and semi-nude models, 58,900 books and
Woo!
booklets, 27,000
Shit.
stuffed mailing envelopes, and a mailing list filled on 17,000 3x5 index cards. These legal troubles.
Bro, how many motherfucking people were you hitting up? They got him down on them Capone charges. What the fuck? Like, I knew it was gonna be a large number, but I didn't actually expect the numbers to be fucking massive. Probably should have though.
Troubles, unsurprisingly, led to the demise of Exotic in 1959. But like Charles Guyette, this was not the end for Bertman. After the closure of Exotic, Bertman was able to avoid a majority of further legal troubles by employing highly skilled legal counsel, who directly monitored his publications for compliance with current obscenity standards. Even still, a total of 5 separate legal cases were faced by Bertman and his associates from 1958 to 1964. However, all legal cases were either dismissed or had convictions overturned. Starting in 1960, Bertman, under the new name of Seal B Associates imprint, went on to publish many more fetish magazines and pulp literature, such as New Exotic, Mask, Connoisseur, Bizarre Life, High Heels, Bizarre Desires, and others well into the 1980s. In addition to selling thousands of photographs and magazines in the mail, Bertman relied on professional distribution platforms. Just to provide some context to the scale of Bertman's operation during its peak, by contract, a minimum quantity of 35,000
That's the
copies of
fucking
each
minimum?
issue were to be printed, and that was only accounting for
How?
the printing presses owned by Acme News. Bertman relied on 3 separate publishers to keep up with publishing demand during his peak. He would continue producing content well into the 1980s, and would go on to spearhead the publishing company Eros Goldstripe, which would continue the production of rubberist and bizarre-focused literature.
Irving Klaw, the pinup king. November 1910 to
So
November
far, we've been
September
discussing some of the
1966.
earliest fetish illustrators, photographers, and writers who were
Okay.
personally
Wait.
involved in the creation of
Are
this
we now getting to a
content.
model?
But Irving Klaw was very different than those previously mentioned. Instead of producing his own fetish content, Klaw would simply commission others to create it for him. This provided
Whoa.
inspiration and funding to many new fetish artists who would go on to
Hmm.
influence the kink scene for decades. Beginning in the late 1940s, fetish illustrators such as Eric Stanton, Gene Bilbrew, Adolfo Ruiz, and fetish actors like Vicky Hayes, Joan Rydell, and arguably the most famous of all, Betty Page. They all got their start with the help of Irving Klaw's publications. In addition, Klaw purchased many of the original negative collections from Charles Guyette and John Willie, and he would reprint these images throughout his various publications. Much like the other people we have discussed, in 1957, Klaw was arrested for distributing pornographic content. It is estimated that Irving Klaw burned over 80% of his photos during this time when the government was pursuing him as a pornographer. After Senate hearings and the ensuing legal difficulties with state authorities, Klaw was barred from continuing his business in New York. To avoid further prosecution, Klaw's Nutrix Publishing Company was restricted to a mail-order-only business. Soon after, Klaw sold the business entirely to Edward Mishkin, who changed the company's name from Nutrix to Mutrix, adding the first initial of his last name. Mishkin would continue Klaw's legacy for a brief period before also receiving an obscenity conviction in 1963.
Are you serious? So all these people got locked up around the same time.
Illustrator to note, who worked very
I
closely
mean, it
with
makes
both
sense since the
Irving
law was
Klaw
out right
and
then.
Leonard Bertman, is Gene Bilbrew. Bilbrew is known as the first black career fetish artist in history. In the late 1940s, Bilbrew started his career creating comics. Gene created the first African-American superhero, the Bronze Bomber, for the Los Angeles Sentinel before working with DC Comics on The Spirit. However, in 1951, at the School of Visual Arts in New York.
Wait, if we're going down the road of all fetishes, let me check something. Is Wonder Woman down here? No, doesn't seem like it. Okay.
New York City, Bilbrew would be introduced to the underground world of fetish illustration through a fellow classmate, Eric Stanton. Stanton was already very familiar with the fetish underground, being first commissioned by Irving Klaw in the late 1940s to illustrate multiple bondage fantasy serials for Klaw's publications. With Stanton's recommendation, Klaw would commission works from Bilbrew for use throughout the Nutrix publication. Because a lot of Gene's artwork would be considered hardcore even by today's standards, Klaw would often censor Gene's work to avoid obscenity convictions. Gene would commonly use the pseudonym ENEG, which was simply Gene spelled backwards. Throughout the 1950s, Bilbrew would go on to work closely with multiple notable fetish publishers, including Edward Mishkin, the Sturman Brothers, and as previously mentioned, Leonard Bertman.
Okay.
The publication Exotic, featuring a large
getting the band
number
back
of
together.
illustrations
Well, not together.
between 1955
Getting the band together.
and 1959. In fact, it was because of Gene's unique predicament-style bondage and hardcore drawings that these illustrations were specifically used as evidence to convict Edward Mishkin of obscenity offenses during his 1960 trial.
Yes. Eric Stanton.
Eric Stanton, as previously mentioned, is another fetish illustrator who started in the late 1940s working alongside Irving Klaw. He would create thousands of fetish illustrations until his death in 1999, with many of these illustrations being rubber-related. But while all this was going on, there was something even crazier happening in the background of Stanton's life. See, from 1958 to 1968, Stanton had a rather interesting roommate. You may have heard the name before, Steve Ditko. During his 10-year period while the two lived together, Steve would create a couple notable characters, such as Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Captain Atom, and Blue Beetle, among others. In fact, in a 1988 interview, Eric Stanton admitted that while Steve was working on Spider-Man, quote, "I added the business about the webs coming out of his hands, and we talked about the characters, and in turn, he helped me with my stuff." Stan would also be credited by artists like Madonna and Banksy, among others, who would take inspiration from his work, with Madonna claiming that Stanton's designs were a direct influence for the 1995 music video Human Nature.
Harry.
one of the last illustrators I feel is important to mention simply goes by the name Harry. Now, not much is known about Harry, other than that both Claw and Mishkin hired him in the early 1960s, while Bill Brew and Stan were some of the
Yes.
first to feature rubber in their illustrations.
Sorry, I stayed up way too late. I'm a little bit tired. I may not make it through this. If I don't, I might have to hit this nap real quick after
Harry
this
would be one of the
video and
first to
wake
feature
back up in
more
like an hour
modern,
or two.
heavy rubber styles. An easy way to spot one of Harry's illustrations is with the signature H on a
H.
curled sheet of paper. Many of the figures
Huh.
in Harry's drawings are outlined with a thick white line, which suggests that he may have designed the characters separately and then pasted his character drawings onto the background. Like I said, not much is known about who Harry actually was, but his drawings
Maybe Harry was one of the other people we've already talked about. I feel like that makes a lot of sense.
certainly brought us one step closer to the creation of the modern latex community. While the previously mentioned publications and artists did feature the use of rubber and latex clothing to various degrees, there were some smaller, lesser-known publications entirely dedicated to the material. More specifically,
Ooh.
these were Macintosh enthusiast magazines. These included publications such as Impermeable Delectable, Gaytime Macintosh's magazine and review,
Daytime.
Macintosh Monthly, which was renamed later to Rain, and Continental Bazaar, among others.
Rain is
Each
such
of
a
these
good title.
magazines mainly
You're back?
consisted of
Welcome,
images of
local.
girls wearing shiny
We're
black
still on the latex
Macintosh
video.
raincoats, rubber boots, and sometimes latex capes. Oftentimes, these magazines would feature stories which had themes of restraintment, masks,
Mags,
gags, and
gags,
often had a punishment
punishments.
prospect. The stories would also have accompanying illustrations depicting these scenarios. Sometimes there would be even more risque pictures, such as a girl bound and gagged in a Macintosh straitjacket, or an article about medieval punishments. But these publications would always tiptoe around censored subjects, such as genitals, trying not to be labeled as hardcore pornography.
Yeah,
Because of
this
this,
isn't
when
porn.
bondage was
There's
present,
other
it was
stuff.
often reported that readers were left somewhat unsatisfied. In one instance, for Continental Bazaar, a reader wrote to the magazine complaining that the model's hands were not tied tightly enough and therefore could not be hurting her. One of the earliest references to Macintosh raincoats used in a fetishistic manner would come from the London Life magazine, discussed earlier. A reader of the magazine wrote in how her husband enjoyed the lovely rustling swish of rubber that her Macintosh raincoat made. This act of wearing Macintosh raincoats for pleasure would later be referred to as
That's
magging.
amazing. Wait, oh,
Near the end
Mackin.
of the 1960s, the first documented Macintosh enthusiast groups would formally develop. One of these was the Macintosh Society, starting in 1969 in the United Kingdom. Over time, the Macintosh Society would grow, attracting members from all over the world, eventually leading to the name change of the International Macintosh Society. Many
That's
couples would
so
attend
fucking
regular
fancy.
Macintosh meetups, and the Macintosh Society started publishing a magazine for its members. Sadly, the society started to break up in the mid-1990s due to members wanting a more broader rubber fetish-focused type of group.
Yeah. Rubber clothing, high demand and limited availability.
Some of the first full rubber bodysuits can be dated back to 18.
These eyes. When you look into them, they tell a story all to their own. Its mustache, shaped like a little dick, and the parting in between. And overall, if you didn't realize it, he's built like a fucking Among Us character.
1972, when inventor Clark S. Merriman created the rubber survival suit. These suits could be inflated with air and were used to survive rough seas in the event of a capsized vessel. Another early footnote in rubber fashion points us to 1902, where cosmetics entrepreneur
I
Helena
knew MTF would
Rubinstein
appear for
designed
that
a rubber
bullshit.
bloomer suit using Macintosh rubber material. This suit was designed for bicycling and was said to have health-giving properties by inducing
Health-giving
profuse
properties.
perspiration in the wearer and providing a kind of detoxification effect.
So it's very hot and it makes you sweat. Cool.
However, beyond Macintosh raincoats and these niche and experimental products, rubber clothing began to see commercial success starting in the 1920s for ladies' undergarments. Many rubber items were available to everyday women, such as bras, girdles, knickers,
Of
corsets,
course.
and corselettes, which, if you did
Hold up, what the fuck is a corselet? Is this a corselet? What the hell? Where the fuck have these been all my life?
know is a combination of a corset and a bra. I didn't know.
Ah,
Although some women
shit.
saw rubber clothing as a novelty item, rubber underwear was seen to be quite progressive, as it allowed for less restricted movement and was more flexible than the garments worn by the older generation.
Blonde or brunette, every girl is wearing the last word of
Mm-hmm.
last youth. Bright, brief affairs, handy for the girl who actually enters the water, and equally appropriate for the girl who doesn't. But whatever she wears, Miss 1935 is determined to take full advantage of the weather.
Rubber also gained a niche market in ladies' swimwear from the late 1930s to the 1950s.
Yeah.
Marketed as odorless, easy to clean, quick to dry, and
Odorless? Rubber. Rubber being odorless. If well maintained, yes. Easy to clean? Should be if you know what the fuck you're doing. Easy to
synthetic,
dry?
rubber swimwear was fashionable for a
Hmm,
brief period.
fair.
These garments would be in use until the late 1960s before being replaced by more breathable and flexible materials such as spandex. Now, when looking at specifically rubber fetish clothing manufacturers,
Mm-hmm.
there have been some small scale stores dating back to the late 1940s in the United Kingdom, United States, and West Germany. However, let's bring our attention back to some of the earliest producers of fetishistic
God damn.
costumes and paraphernalia. One such manufacturer was Yves Richard, located in France and established by the husband and wife team of Natavia and Richard in 1913. This business
She has more studs on this motherfucker than Magneto has ammunition.
continued until 1943, even operating in secrecy during a majority of the Nazi occupation of France. During the 1930s, Yves Richard began to serve literal slaves of fashion by offering S&M and fetish
Really?
outfits. For the most part, this was a mail-order business, with advertisements listed in French magazines such as La Vie Parisienne and La Soirée. However, this business was one of the first to use a public retail outlet to sell fetish clothing.
We sell this
Throughout
in
the
retail now?
1930s, Yves
Nice.
Richard's style would shift from early
Bro, go down to your local
objects,
grocery store and
such
get
as
some
the
porn.
usual corsets and opera gloves,
Actually,
to
imagine if they do just
media-focused
sell porn
objects
at the
like
grocery
leather
store.
masks.
Bro, walk to the
Yves
Dollar General and
Richard
get
was
yourself a.
reflecting during this time period. The majority of fetish costume production
Oh
tended to be a
shit.
side business for
Walk in
most
the fucking Dollar
craftsmen.
General.
For example, it's noted that one of these side
Go
businesses
to the
came
dollar
from an
store and get some porn.
equestrian supply manufacturer who also produced alternative leather garments in secret, such as fetish high-heeled shoes, leather corsets, and of course, pony play gear. Many of these
Yeah, pony
businesses would
play.
have connections to popular distributors such as Leonard Bertman and Irving Klaw, who would use these products in either their own photographs or place advertisements for people to purchase their own bizarre costumes. These outfits, however, were expensive, rare, and custom made. Not much is known about these manufacturers
That's far too fucking realistic for my taste. Jesus. Nope. Also, that seems like it'd be heavy as shit.
from the 1930s to the
Like, that can't be good on
1950s
your
due to
back.
the secrecy and relative obscurity of these companies' side hustle. Post World War II, it wouldn't be until 1964 that the first major fetish clothing company in the United States was to be established. This was House of Milan, located in Chicago, Illinois at 162 North State Street. Briefly called Futura Fashions, House of Milan would become one of the largest producers and distributors of S&M and fetish erotica in the United States during the late 1960s and 1970s. This was the first public retail outlet for explicitly fetishistic
Mm-hmm.
clothing in the United States, and only one of a handful in existence, with the previously discussed Yves Richard as being one of the others. In its formation, House of Milan was closely linked with Leonard Bertman. Bertman's publishing company would release House of Milan's first catalog, the Bizarre Costume Catalog, in 1960. House of Milan had a distinct focus on media fetish interests, focusing on rubber, leather, and PVC styles displayed in Bertman's publications.
Mm-hmm.
In the early 1970s, the company would rename again to HOM and would move to California, where they would produce fetish-themed magazines and later VHS videos well into the 1980s. During the 1960s, fetish clothing production, specifically of the rubber variety, resumed over in Europe and Great Britain. In an anonymous
I am gonna be
interview with
quiet
a
for certain
London
parts of this video just
manufacturer from
because, not
1968,
much I can
we
joke
can see the
on.
pricing for some of the most popular rubber items. These retailers would typically advertise the clothing as slimming garments or protective clothing, especially in the UK and German advertisements. This clothing in general had the same characteristics of being very tight fitting, utilizing straps, buckles, and laces. In America, these advertisements were often featured in more pulp magazines,
Mm-hmm.
as well as all the literature discussed earlier. In contrast, many of the British manufacturers would advertise in specific mail order brochures and catalogs. Prospective buyers would often have to purchase the catalog first, because in most cases, people would simply collect the catalogs but not purchase anything. When these
Yeah,
firms seldomly advertised in general,
it's the same reason why people realized, oh shit, we gotta use clips for sale. Because if you put full fucking videos online, no one's paying for them. Man. You gotta put them on clips for sale and tease the fuck out of people, and then get them to pay for the full deal.
newspapers, they would often be discreetly worded and usually appear in the personal section. Even with the increased attention from these publications, distributors, and craftsmen, it wouldn't be until 1957 that the first true dedicated rubber fetish clothing business would be developed, and this, of course, was John Sutcliffe's Adam Age. Although Adam Age started as an innocent shop designing stylistic leather suits for motorcycle riders,
I
during
believe
the
this
early
was mentioned during
1960s,
the video
Adam
number
Age would
one, right?
quickly grow its fetishistic roots, coming up with many iconic designs like the first skin tight catsuit. It's important to note another company who would become involved in Sutcliffe's business, and this was Sealware Rubber. Sealware adapted John's original 1950s leather catsuit designs and turned them into full rubber garments. It cannot be understated how revolutionary this clothing was for the time. For a
Mm-hmm.
frame of reference, the mini skirt and modern tights wouldn't come into fashion until 5 years later in 1964. During the 1960s, the world of sealware and Adam Age's rubber outfits would spread outside of Great Britain, and the companies quickly established a good relationship with customers from all over the world. The latex fetish community would only grow bigger, as loosening obscenity law restrictions allowed for the advertisement of
Really?
such garments within the vanilla tabloid press.
Mm-hmm.
The first half of the 20th century brought innumerable change to society, technology, legislature, and the infamous sexual revolution. It was through the risks
The
taken
sexual
by early
revolution is
fetish
among
pioneers
us.
that future rubber focused communities could develop and flourish into the 21st century. While these freedoms are not yet experienced on a global level, these innovators should serve as an inspiration for all countries waiting to begin their own sexual revolution. It's through the risks taken by countless individuals during these periods that we are provided with so many privileges
Again, as I said in the very first video, bro got a dong like no other. That or it's blown up, but who knows?
and the freedom to enjoy
Also, why does he look so fucking familiar? Just random questions.
our rubber. Hello, my name is Whiteout, and thank you for tuning in to part 2 of the History of Latex Fetishism series.
Thank you very much for letting us introduce ourselves to me. I'm Delzar Slit, and I did a reaction video to this, one, because I genuinely just want to know, and two, because I did a reaction to the first one, in which I genuinely just want to know history. Also because I really find it funny. Yep. Uh, Rubber reveal. I actually own zero rubber items because I'm broke.
There was a lot of work that went into this video, and I want to personally thank several sources that were able to help out in the creation of this video.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is Robert Benevue II for his 1998 thesis statement on the development of sadomasochism as a cultural style in the 20th century United States. This is where I got a lot of my information for London Life and Yiva Richard, so big thank you to him. Second one is Richard Perez Savez
Always remember, people, if you go and do some searching and researching, cite your fucking sources. Thank you.
for his work with Charles Guyette and Gene Bilbrew. He actually has a blog called Fet History. Highly recommend checking it out. Fantastic resource for historical fetish information. And he also recently released a book on Gene Bilbrew. That's a really good read. I highly recommend checking it out. So thank you to him. And then lastly, I want to thank Morris North for the 1970 book, The Outer Fringe of Sex. This is a psychological perspective of the rubber fetish community going up to, well, the year 1970. And while I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the psychiatric opinions in this
Yeah,
book,
no,
it
fuck
was a
them.
very valuable resource for gaining some very unique and rare information into the rubber community during this time period. So I want to thank everyone for their
Mm-hmm.
contributions and help in the creation of this video. Now, with that being said, I would love to work on a part 3 for this video series, doing a deep dive into the latex
Yes.
community from the late 1960s to the year
Year
2000,
2000.
time period which a lot of stuff happened. And
Yeah.
I'm going to need your help. I have my social media links in the video
This
description.
video is like 2 years old. I wonder, did he ever make the freaking part 3 already? If not, we'll see. I'll have the links and stuff in the description, by the way, for anyone who wants to actually go to the original video and watch it when I'm not just speaking and making jokes on everything and doing dumb shit.
Below. You can reach out to me through there if you have any information that you would like to help contribute. I'm going to need your stories, your pictures, your magazines, anything that you want to help contribute so that we can get an accurate representation of the latex fetish community during this time period. I'd really love your help. So anyways, thank you again so much for watching, and I wish you all a very wonderful day. Thanks again.
Lovely. Anyways, that's a really well thought out outro. Anyways, I'm gonna basically just say this. Take your ass over here to this original creator. The original video is gonna be in the link to the description. The original link to their channel will be in the link to the description. And at the same time, have a lovely day, everybody. And I guess goodbye. That's all I gotta really say, honestly. Okay.